hard because it was like...
Yeah.
We should be like,
You know,
it ended up
Ray,
being fine.
me,
Yeah.
and then we'll like separate, and then you can line them up or something.
Okay, if you can't even clap on a beat, there's no fucking way you're gonna hit do re mi.
Hold on, I'll clap. See?
Did you just clap, or
Well,
are you still waiting?
Hi, and welcome to Storied. Hi, and welcome to Storied. This is a podcast where we take one piece of media and adapt it into another piece of media.
Yeah, this week the pieces of media are Nightmare on Elm Street, the classic horror movie, slasher movie, starring Freddie Krueger as a real person, and we're going to turn that into a video game.
We haven't actually made a video game for a while now, so I'm excited to actually sit down and figure this one out. We haven't figured out what kind of video game we're going to turn it into yet, so this is going to be a good episode. So I know that it's a movie from the 80s, but I haven't seen it since I was like a teenager, and then I went and watched it really recently, like right before this podcast, and I was way less scared, weirdly, than I was as a kid. I don't know. I forgot how like totally cheesy that movie is.
It's incredibly corny.
Yeah. But it was totally terrifying when I was a kid, so I guess just a lot of that was lost in translation of just growing up.
I just saw, when I was a kid, so my mother, our mother, Chris, never let me watch scary movies when I was a kid, and I was over a friend's house, and the scene in the middle of the film where I think Johnny Depp is the one who gets killed, where he's getting dragged around the ceiling, or she's getting dragged around the ceiling.
Girl.
It's the blood. It's the blood that spurts out of the bed, right?
Yeah.
They're two separate scenes, but Johnny Depp dies. So I remember seeing that scene where the girl gets dragged around in the ceiling when I was a kid, and I still think that imagery is pretty creative, and that was creepy. That was like one of the creepier parts of the movie. Even rewatching it, there is a couple scenes where I think the imagery is fucking creepy, and that's one of them. The setup to watching it now is so dated and everything, and we've just seen that movie so many times since then. But the scene. That's like that might be the first death in the film is when the girl. Yeah, I watched it yesterday and I already forgot the sequence. But Johnny Depp dies. He gets pulled into his mattress into like a giant hole, and then it just shoots blood. Yeah, like a geyser of blood. Way more than he
It's definitely like an homage to The
body.
Shining, right? Or just like more blood that has ever existed in that hotel in The Shining comes out of the elevator. So it's I always
No, you'd
struck
be
me as
surprised though. You'd be surprised how much blood a person has. And when you like stab a person, like stab them a couple of times, like 3 or 4 times, and then you just watch the blood like spurt out of them. Like that's a lot of blood.
I'm going to take your word on that.
I've never stabbed just one person, so I just got the amount of blood confused.
Oh well, you're missing out.
I have to say, I knew that Johnny Depp was in this movie just because that's just sort of knowledge that we as human beings just have, but I didn't remember that while watching the movie, and then I went back and like, oh, that's right. I remember that Johnny Depp's character dies in a bed and like falling into his bed, but this whole time it did not look like Johnny Depp because he's 20 or whatever in the movie. So it was really weird to go back and be like, holy shit, that was Johnny Depp. It doesn't look anything like him. I'm so used to seeing him as a very specific looking person, even when he was a young actor.
We have that movie to thank for Johnny Depp being in movies. He apparently just went along with his friend who was auditioning. And he didn't get the part. And the other guy, the casting director, looked at Johnny Depp and they were like, "Hey, you're hot. You want to try out?" And he was like, "Sure." And then he just got it. And then that friendship probably ended.
Yeah,
probably. I like the idea that the friend went off to star in the like rival horror movie that never really went anywhere.
With a daydream on.
I gotta tell you, talking about
Street.
Johnny Depp, watching this movie yesterday, it was actually really refreshing to just have him just play a person and not a fucking wacko like cartoon
Not a
character.
wacko.
He was actually better in that film and more tolerable than he has been in, I think, probably 5 years.
That's probably why I didn't recognize him, because he wasn't like prancing around and just acting like he's drunk and or high, like in just crazy ways. So I just like, oh, he's acting like a normal human being. That's why I didn't recognize him.
Yeah, that's probably it. He also he wasn't wearing some sort of weird affected makeup or costume.
Yeah,
And
no
putting on
heavy
a voice.
eyeliner in this movie, not yet.
Yeah.
Johnny Depp as Freddy Krueger.
Voices a different character.
It is amazing to me that they. I wonder if Michael Bay, when they rebooted Nightmare on Elm Street a couple years ago with Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger, I wonder if they tried to get Johnny Depp for that. I feel like they probably did.
I could like, but then it's one of those things where he plays a different character. You know, it's not like it's the same character but 40 years later or whatever. It's he would just play like the dad or weird night janitor or something.
So hang on,
Krueger.
Yeah, Krueger.
Okay,
I mean,
that would have been one hell of a Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, it's right up his alley. He could just make bad puns and fucking like ham it up. Like that's basically what Robert Englund is doing.
And beat and much younger people.
Wow.
All right, so we're going to turn this into a video game.
Yeah, I got it.
We're going to turn this into...
Okay, just making sure that was clear.
Everybody got it, Chris.
Okay. I just want to make sure that everybody understands how clever that was.
Yeah, everybody understands how clever it was. Don't worry.
Okay, good. What were you saying, Harrison? That was...
nothing. Please continue. I was trying to get this podcast back on fucking track, but please continue.
We need to do that.
I think I have it written down here in our pre-show notes that the first 20 minutes is about Johnny Depp. Happy Halloween.
That's pretty good. Yeah, that's the other thing. This is supposed to be the Halloween episode because this is coming out on Halloween. I can't think of anything more terrifying than Johnny Depp. So
we'd be remiss to not mention the Friday the 13th game that I don't think any of us have played yet.
No, but I did
came out.
I watched it on. I watched bits of it on. It's funny you say that because I watched bits of it on YouTube last night, and I watched the Angry Video Game Nerd episode about it.
But the original game,
the NES game,
the 80s. Oh, the 80s game. I'm not talking about that one. I'm talking about the one that just came out like this year.
Yeah, they made a new one where I think like one player plays Jason and the other players play the campers.
Oh, Friday the 13th. Sorry, I thought you said Elm Street.
Oh yes. No, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, go on. Sorry.
Well, it's it's a really good idea, and to just have like a multiplayer game where like it's one person plays as the killer and everybody else is trying to just survive. And that seems like a cool thing. I hear that game's had some problems, but is now on track and has been pretty good now that they've done some patches. I don't really know. We'll have to check it out. But it's an interesting place to start from because the thing about Freddy Krueger is he can invade your dreams. So I feel like we're gonna have some Psychonauts style weirdness going on in this game, no matter what happens. You'd probably want to do. There's some great stuff in like Arkham Knight, for instance, where you turn the camera around and the environment changes around you. Things like that would be a rad thing to include. Silent Hill-esque, I would imagine.
Yeah. Just like things are moving. Like every time you move away from the camera, like all the mannequins restack themselves and just
yeah.
Right?
Silent Hill would be a good comp for the kind of game we should make out of this because not a lot actually happens to you in that. Like you're basically just running from things the whole time.
Right.
You have some mediocre weaponry that you can use, but you have to find it, and you never know when you're gonna go into the dark world or whatever it's called in actual Silent Hill lore. Sorry, I don't know that.
Some Silent Hill nerds may be really upset that you didn't know what that was.
Well, that's okay.
I like.
I'm proud of you for not remembering.
I would be really upset if you had that knowledge. What I liked about the changing to the dream world stuff in the actual movie is they did a good job of. It's never really quite. You're never really right away. You're not really sure if they're actually in the dream world or not. Like they sort of like the girl is in the back of the classroom and she's kind of like nodding off, but she kind of like just turns and looks and sees a weird thing, and you're like, is she in the dream world or is she hallucinating or what's going on? Like it's never just like a flash and like suddenly everything's dark and creepy and evil and she's in the boiler room and things have changed suddenly. It's very like gradual. Like you don't realize you're in the dream world right away. Things just start to get weird over time.
Yeah.
You know, like there's a kid at the front of the classroom, like reading like an excerpt from Shakespeare, and then like the things he starts talking about are get really creepy and shit. And so like swapping in and out, like going from the real world to the dream world, and having that transition be fucking like was really off-putting and like unsettling could be really interesting. I don't know what mechanically would provide, but there's something really cool there.
Yeah. Well, that's why I was going to have a Silent Hill, because it's cool that, you know, you're just wandering around and then all of a sudden the world just goes and starts turning into like a different thing. And it's scary. Like it's, you know, it's one of those things that you're like, oh fuck, okay, now I got to deal with this shit for a while. I felt safe and now I don't feel safe, and that's kind of a
that's like
thing to do.
And that's like an age, kind of like a long-running, effective video game thing. I remember in Castlevania 2, Belmont's Quest, when it turned, is it Belmont's
Simon's Quest, please.
Simon's Quest, yeah, sorry. But it would turn to night, and like the screen would just be like, it's nighttime, it's like, watch your fucking ass. And then like all the zombies would start coming out of the ground, and it like, back then, it was actually, I mean, being a child, it scared the shit out of me. I was like, oh my god, there's other crap that's going to find me on the screen, you know? And you couldn't, it was kind of like this relief when day would come again.
Yeah.
And that was really the thing.
Yeah. Like you survived.
I definitely remember that text box popping up and saying, watch your fucking ass.
But yeah.
That's a really weird thing for a Nintendo certified, like, gold stamped game to do back then.
That's before the translations got better.
Yeah.
Oh, it was like a translation issue?
Yeah, it was.
Or what the original translation was watch your ass, and it translated into, like, be careful of your behind or something like that.
Your posterior.
That was, I thought that watch your fucking ass was actually the cleaner version of the translation.
What I do like is that there, in the Silent Hill games, there is that slow, like, piling on of dread that starts to sort of, like, it starts somewhat normal, and then over time you feel less and less and less safe, to your point, Sean. And, like, I don't know if you played the fourth Silent Hill game called The Room, or like Room or something like that. I don't remember the name of it. I only watched a roommate play it in college. But the idea was you start in your apartment, and then you find like a weird hole in your wall, and you go through it, and then you appear in Silent Hill. And it's really dangerous there, and there are monsters, and you can't heal. And then once you complete that chapter of the game, you sort of like go, and you wake up in your apartment again as if it was a dream. But over time, the hole in the mirror like gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and like starts to take up the whole wall. And eventually, even the safety of your apartment, where you can heal and no monsters will attack you, starts to go away, and you lose that like momentary catharsis of like, oh my god, I finally made it back to like, you know, the safe place, because there eventually the whatever bad energy starts to find you there, and you can't heal there anymore, and you get these weird high-pitched whining noise when you wake up, and the sort of slow erosion of the small island of like peace that you would have is super. Yeah, it feels super on point for this game.
Yeah, it's like you have like almost as you continue to not like sleep, you get more tired, which is that's just a great device to use. You know?
That's exactly what I was thinking about when I was watching the movie and thinking about this. And like conversely, like you can in the movie, she takes like you never actually see her take it, but she's drinking coffee and she finds like this no-dozy kind of stuff. It's like stay awake pills, and she finds it in the medicine cabinet. You never actually watch her.
I love that she just have that. I love that her parents just have that in her medicine cabinet.
Well, her mom is a fucking weird drunk in the movie, and that I totally forgot about.
That's true.
But
she totally is.
But like she's like the most calm alcoholic I've ever seen in the movie. But what's interesting about that is like there could be, you know, you can use those things and they could buy you time potentially, but like they could have adverse effect on like your health meter. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah, like you have like a sanity meter, like in like Eternal Darkness. I don't know if you ever played that GameCube game where you had like a health meter and like a sanity meter, and sometimes you could do one, like use an item that would restore one, but at the cost of the other.
Right.
You know, and like if they both bottomed out, you'd be dead. So it was kind of like a balancing plate kind of thing. You know, like spinning plates.
Yeah, that was great. That was a great mechanic. The sanity meter, especially affecting things, was fun. I mean, it was, you know, and I feel like you know, this is almost a 1-to-1 map, but it changes completely based on the fact that just falling asleep means that you have to deal with like a Silent Hill-esque dream sequence. So like
yeah.
Like it's a great time pressure for you to have to, you know, like we'd put a meter on screen or something that let you know that you're gonna fall asleep and that you have to do something about that. And so, if you don't have any more no-dos left, or you don't have any coffee, or whatever, like these stupid things that you use to stay awake, that means you're going to go into the world, and whether you're prepared or not for that is something that you could also handle. It's like you might have to like balance trying to solve the outside awake mystery of figuring out how to get Freddie to stop bothering you, as a thing, but also balance that against having to be prepared to go into the dream world if it happens.
There's also, I was just thinking about the similar thing, and Harrison, I think, brought it up right before we started talking live on the podcast. But the first movie at least ends with like this weird Home Alone. Like she sets up these weird like Home Alone booby traps for Freddie and like draws
Except
him out.
they're really, really violent. Like the Home Alone ones were somewhat cute. We're like, oh, I put some like broken glass on the ground, which is I guess not cute, but she like sets up like a hammer to like hit him in the head and like light him on fire and stuff. It's bananas.
Yeah, it's very strange. But it's also like it's cool that the idea of having to make a stand or something is something that you could design into the game as like a thing you gotta do just to survive. And like if you don't do it well enough, if you don't set up your booby traps well enough to survive the nights, there's a little bit of a strategy element to it, right? Like you could actually set it up poorly, and Freddie just makes his way straight through the house and kills you, and then you got to start over.
Right.
There's some cool
I think
stuff to
I like the idea that you have some sort of bar, like like an energy bar or something that once it's empty, you fall asleep. No matter what you're doing, you could be in the middle of tying a knot, you just collapse on the ground. And whether or not all the actions in your game require you to burn energy, like just walking around or sprinting or crafting, whatever, I don't know what system we'd have, or fighting, empty that bar out, but you can sort of refill it with
yoga.
Coffee and no-dos and yoga, I guess. And you have to like decide like what am I willing to get, what can I get done with the like energy that I have this time, before like I'm gonna go into the dream world. It's coming, like the Castlevania thing, like night is coming, we need to just be prepared for it. So what can I get done in the time that I have could be a really interesting sort of like sort of high risk, high reward sort of balancing act.
Yeah.
Another thing in the movie, sorry, Sean, but this will be quick. But another thing in the movie is she sets alarms for herself. So you could have that if you feel like you need to sleep for a little bit. Your character's getting really tired. You might be able to like, all right, I can create enough traps in this room that I can survive for like 20 minutes and get like this much sleep meter back. Mm-hmm. You can weigh that against and set an alarm so that it might not be in real time, but you're kind of controlling the amount of time you're going into the dream world for at once, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you don't have to like dedicate. You don't have to. It's not always a constant amount of time you have to survive there. You have control over that as well. It could be interesting. Is it just another tactic for how to balance these things?
Right. Well, it depends on where you are, right? Like you could do a thing. It's interesting where moving around means that you're not near your bedroom where your alarm clock is, but you could be somewhere else, like a friend's house, and they have one, and you could set it, but not.
Well, she has a watch in the movie, Sean.
That talks to her.
Oh, that's right.
It literally goes, timer set, 3 minutes, counting down. And it's like very clearly like a Casio, like $3 digital watch. It's pretty impressive technology.
It looks like it came out of like a quarter machine.
Yeah.
But that was state of the art when they made the movie, though. That was probably $3,000 watch.
Somebody was like, it talks? I believe that.
What I was going to say before, though, was the idea, like, one of the most effective horror games I've played is actually Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's almost too intense. Yeah. And the reason it's intense is because you have to look around a lot, and you have to use the same power to keep your doors shut as you do to, what is it, look around the room?
They power the cameras.
Yeah, you power the cameras, and so you have this one resource that you have to use to kind of manage everything, and it makes it incredibly like plate spinningly intense.
It's very similar to Amnesia, where like you have a sanity meter, and by interacting directly with the monsters, it drains your sanity meter, and like you start seeing weird shit. And that's how it actually hurts you, other than coming and like punching you in the face and killing you. And that's just designed to make the monster scary, because that means you can't look directly at it. And the same thing with Five Nights at Freddy's, where you want to power the door and shut the door so the monster doesn't get you, which means you can't see. You have to turn the cameras off and not see it. So you're willingly tossing yourself back into ignorance and the scary unknown to be physically protected instead of like mentally protected.
Yeah, it's a cool idea for Nightmare on Elm Street to have to manage your awake level, your level of awakeness, how much sleep you get, because like having to manage, like having to go to sleep on purpose to go into the nightmare world is probably better for you to get to sleep than it is to crash, and it should be like that in the game, right? Like you almost have to go set your alarm to go in there and prepare and just deal with it. And for short intervals, so that you don't get trapped there for a long period of time, because that's probably harder, right? So it's actually kind of managing your own energy levels. Seems like it would be a really, it would be kind of difficult in a way. It's almost like managing your currency.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because in the movie, the main girl, she just doesn't go to sleep for like 7 days straight. Yeah, Nancy just doesn't. She doesn't go to sleep for like 7 days straight. She's like popping pills, drinking coffee, and she starts like becoming hysterical. And even though she's right, everyone around her is like, "Oh, she's just seeing things. She's not sleeping. She's really upset because her friend died." And it's the classic like horror movie trope of none of the parents believing that like the teenagers who know what's really going on. And so the idea that you can sort of push past this meter into like exhaustion, but there's like big repercussions. Like maybe there are certain bars that certain thresholds you can hit past the main like tiredness bar that start to, you can't move as fast, or you start seeing hallucinations, or you can't like do complex like manual tasks. But you can stay awake if you're just like, I'm not ready. I'm just not ready to go into the nightmare world. You can sort of push into like this like red zone, this like danger zone. And it will start to have like physical costs, and maybe it takes twice as long to refill that bar from sleep than it would otherwise. And it's sort of like you're taking out a loan on your like sleep deprivation to get something, one last thing done before you go into the nightmare world, but it sort of exhausts you,
Yeah, and what's weird is I always thought the movie should do this, but you ever been so tired that you end up just kind of staring straight ahead and you're almost like sleeping?
Yes,
but you're not actually asleep. And I feel like that being dangerous would be cool. Like, it's like all of a sudden, like, you just kind of fall into this, like, fugue, staring. I know you can't do this in the game, but in a movie it would be good. And then,
just
like,
take all the controls away from the player.
Yeah, exactly. But then Freddie is just there, like...
Just hanging out.
Like, he just enters the real world for a second, almost.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is weird.
Or conversely, he could start to get a sense of your physical location based on how quickly you commit to the dream world. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're starting to, if your sleep meter is going down, and like you're starting to get into a similar kind of like in between state, the longer you prolong trying to stay awake, the closer he is to you when you enter the dream world. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like as soon as you start to fall asleep, or once you finally get into his realm fully, he's just like, he's already been made aware of where you are, if that makes sense. Like,
it's cool. I know this is a weird comp, but like, it could be really intense if the crashing part of it was actually, like, it was an extended, like, you didn't just pass out. Like, you had an extended period of time where you knew you were going to crash, and you had a certain amount of time to set up or fix that. And the comp that I have is like, how tense is it in Sonic the Hedgehog when you're underwater, and you're about to lose your air, and that music keeps, like getting more and more intense,
ratcheting up,
and you need to fucking find an air bubble. Like, that would feel super good in a game like this, where it's like you're
like going through drawers, like fuck, where's the coffee?
Yeah,
where's the coffee?
exactly,
Shit. Yeah, it's like a timer counting down,
or like finding a way to get to one of your stashes, or get to get someplace where one of your friends is, so that they can wake you up or help you, or something.
Yeah, or you get to a place you've booby trapped.
Right.
It's funny you mentioned friends too, because I was thinking like, how long can we sustain this kind of gameplay? But what could be cool too is like if you're the first person this is kind of happening to, and similar to the predicament Nancy was placed in the movie. It's like nobody believes her. It's if you could, it's like when you go in the dream world, there's a way you could collect pieces of evidence to kind of like convince people in the real world that this is happening, and like they could come into the dream world with you. You know what I mean? Like I don't. Beyond that point, I don't know what it is, but like it could be another source of ally, and also could we can talk after this kind of broader mechanic gameplay conversation about what the story is, but it could also forward the story, right? Like do you as you're forwarding relationships with people, do you even want to subject them to this? Do you want to warn them? Do you hate them? Do you know what I mean? Are they in your way? Do you want to just push them in front of Freddie? Like there's playability in that, I think.
Yeah, it's funny that like if we were to make it true to the movie, then we would just have to like you bring back constant evidence, and like nobody believes you still. Like she brings a hat back, and everyone's like, I don't know where she got that hat. It's crazy. It's got Freddy Krueger's name in it, but I don't know where she got it. But definitely not from the dream world. Like it's like physical evidence.
It's like through your stomach.
Yeah, like she brings back
in your stomach.
Physical evidence that this monster exists, and the mom like knows he exists because she killed him, which is a hilarious thing on its own. That like I guess the implied story there is Freddie is going and killing the children of the parents that killed him when he was alive, which is weird that he wouldn't just kill the parents. But he should. So the mother knows that Freddy Krueger is a real person and he was a real murderer. So like when her daughter is like strapped to a bed in the like sleep institute, and then like doing the experiments on her to see what's wrong with her when she goes to sleep, and she's like strapped to a bed, and then she comes back out and she's got a hat in her hand which says Freddy Krueger in like the brim. It's like his name's in it, and everyone's like, no, still I don't know where she got that hat. She must have just picked it up off the street. Like it's physical evidence that she didn't come into the room with, and still people don't believe her.
And she's cut.
Yeah. How did you do that to
sleep.
yourself? Like what?
Yeah. Well, we couldn't be more sure that you were actually asleep. How did you do that to yourself?
Right.
Yeah, like they were just watching her, like literally watching her.
They're watching a computer that's telling them that she's asleep.
Yeah,
so
it's bizarre.
So this game, we started this off by sort of using the comp of the Friday the 13th game, the new one, right? Where it's a multiplayer sort of 4v1 or 5v1 or whatever the number is, where one person plays the bad guy, the monster, and the other people play the victims, right? So if we were to match that somewhat to our Nightmare on Elm Street game, it sounds like we would have one person play Freddie, and then a bunch of people all play victims, right? And then
I think what we're talking about doing is a single player thing. Like we'd have to change it up entirely.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean
that makes more sense.
I mean,
it feels more.
That, but I feel like.
Go ahead.
I was going to say you could do that, but for the sake of trying to make something new in this podcast, like maybe we should start somewhere else. I mean, we could definitely like riff on that for a second, but it feels like, that game, as we've talked about it, and is, let's be honest, the same property.
Right.
Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street.
I don't know, man. One guy's got a knife and a mask, and the other guy's got like a bunch of knives and no mask. Come on.
And a hat.
And a weird sweater.
Look, they're totally different.
But, I mean...
It's such a weird character choice, too. Like, Jason is fucking terrifying because you can't see his face, and he's got a knife, and he just doesn't talk. And like Freddy Krueger has a Christmas sweater on, and like a handful of weird like a claw. It's like he's the least like terrifying, and like a fedora. Like he's like it's so like we got to make him really different from Jason and Michael Myers, so he can't look like that. So we're just gonna do the fucking like polar opposite of that. A dude who like talks a lot and like. Sort of just like waits for you to show up in his realm and kind of hangs out with you for a bit and rolls around on the bed with you. He's so not threatening at all.
There is a weird logic to his tactics because like I think the first time you see him, he's got like this really weird stretchy arms.
Yep.
And he's like starts walking towards her, and then she turns around, and starts running, and all of a sudden she just runs into him. Like it's in the same shot. It's a clearly like two people camera trick. But why the fuck didn't he just do that? Like if he could just teleport right next to her, why doesn't he ever just do that with his knives out to stab her? There's a lot of rolling around on the floor with her in this movie.
He's he's having fun with her first. He's playing with his food.
The meat.
Yeah.
You're right. I didn't think of that. There's a lot of depth to that character.
Yeah, he doesn't want to just rush it.
I don't want to make it slow, or whatever he says.
So yeah, this makes more sense as like a single player thing, almost more like Alien Isolation, where there's an AI that's kind of like tracking you and trying to find you, and you're trying to sort of set up situations where you can overcome it.
Well, and I think honestly, most games. So Alien Isolation, I think we've talked about this before, but the big problem that I had with it, and I think you did too, Harrison, was that like when that alien gets around, it doesn't fucking go away. It just kind of hangs around, and it's like annoying after a while and not scary.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like,
just go away.
Go in another room for a minute so I can get out of this locker. I'm just sitting in this fucking locker. And I think that, stretches of it would be, you go into the nightmare world, and it would just be creepy and weird, but Freddie wouldn't fucking find you, It would be some of the other weird shit that happens in the nightmare world that you would see. Like, Until Dawn, you did a good job with this, where there's just stretches of that game where you're walking down a hallway and expecting something to happen the whole time, and then nothing does.
Yeah.
And it's just nice because it makes it so that you never know when to feel safe. And I think that's a problem that a lot of horror things in general have, is that they feel like constant pressure is better than letting your imagination take over. And I think especially with a game, you want to really let people imagine that they're going to get attacked and be paranoid about it and be moving the camera and looking around in the world and trying to make sure that nothing's going to happen to them.
And I think what we were talking about before, a lot of the things we were talking about with maybe you can control the amount of time you're in there, maybe you can booby trap, maybe there's a balance between your sleep meter versus your health meter and all that kind of stuff, like will help combat that a little bit, because you can come out of the dream world if you set an alarm or whatever circumstances we create. But one thing too that could help solve that problem that Alien Isolation had is one of the staple things about the property is that it's a group of teenagers, and Freddie is hunting them one by one. So just because you're asleep doesn't mean that he's after you. Like there could be other NPCs in the game that he could be after, and you could have a stake in them and you want to save them, but he could be, I don't know if we'd be able to monitor all of our friends sleeping if there's a organic way to do that in the story of the game, but like you could have to go save your friend, like he could be just targeting somebody else at the moment, and especially if we were to move this to a multiplayer platform, that could be the case as well. Like, I'm not going to let Freddie kill that guy right now. That
Johnny Depp,
right
got to save Johnny Depp.
Yeah, clearly.
When you were talking about that, the thing that I thought of was that you just fucking swapped to this character as Maniac Mansion style, where like you're like, all right, I got to put Nancy in the dream world, and then I'm going to swap to Johnny Depp's character and like booby trap some shit, but I got to like keep an eye. I got to swap back and like make sure that he isn't like chasing. You know what I mean? Like that spinning plate thing might evoke some of the feelings that we might be going for, where it's just like I'm trying to do a lot and I don't have a lot of time to do it all. I don't know if it would be like not a pause. It wouldn't be a pause, but like we would have to balance the nightmare world so that it wouldn't be so lethal that you can't like take your eyes off of it. But there might be something interesting in like you're trying to keep as many of these kids alive as possible for X days, or until you can kill Freddie in the real world. Like you can get him to come to the real world. There's like a specific set of things you have to do before you can bring him to the real world where you can kill him. Or banish him or whatever, but like you're going to lose some people. Like there are going to be kids that die. There's no other way to get this done, and that kind of lets you sort of choose who you value more. And like, all right, sorry Nancy, this time you got to go because you had the item that I needed, the MacGuffin, to accomplish this goal. You have to hand it off, but now you're out of energy. Sorry, you got to go into the nightmare world, and I don't have enough like whatever. Resources to keep you alive for this thing. So unfortunately, you're going to be the thing that distracts Freddie. Like Freddie can only keep his attention on one thing. So if he's tracking Nancy in the nightmare world, you know that you're safe to do other things with other characters. Maybe there's something there.
That's kind of cool, and you could do it in a way like when you play like a Warcraft. Obviously, it wouldn't be an overhead view of the world the way that like a Warcraft or StarCraft is, or actually maybe it could. Why the hell not? But that's not what I'm thinking. But you could kind of use booby traps and stuff. It's like, all right, I know I have to send this character into the dream world. It's going to draw Freddie, but I can construct enough things to protect them long enough so that I can do this in the waking world as another character.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's like there'd be a tactical element like that. Like I think that could be interesting.
Well, I was thinking like earlier, and this makes me even think more that it might work, but it could be really cool to play as more than one kid. You know, a la Maniac Mansion or whatever, and switch between them, like where you know you're all in it together. But maybe you play all of them, but you can't save them all. Or you know what I mean, something along those lines. Or you have like there's a couple people you do play, and then there's NPCs too that can be affected by what you do in the world. And I don't know. There just might be something to that where you guys could share resources or like team up. Like you could team two of them up.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
You know, I don't know. It might be a cool. There might be something to that. I haven't thought about it very much, but I was thinking that like that way you could there could be an multiplayer element to it, but you could also just play it by yourself.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that what Harrison had pitched too, kind of?
No, I didn't hear.
Yeah, Sean.
Oh, were you pitching that you would play as more than one kid?
Yeah, I was saying that you would swap a la Maniac Mansion between the kids. So like you send in Nancy to the dream world, and then while you've sent in that character, you swap the camera over to Greg or whatever the hell his name was.
I thought you were pitching that you basically you can manage them, but you don't actually play as them.
No, I was definitely fully thinking Maniac Mansion, where you just swap over, and now you're Nancy. You swap over, and now you're Johnny Depp or whatever, for sure. I think that makes the most sense. And the fact that we both got there independently sort of proves out that it seems like it's a pretty strong idea.
You're Nancy, and then you're 54-year-old Johnny Depp.
Inhabiting the body, or you're 54-year-old Johnny Depp voice acting his 20-year-old character self.
Yeah, we gotta get him in
for more.
Oh yeah, for sure we will. But he's that character, but also Freddy Krueger, so he plays a dual role. But I think that
he needs to be able to exercise his versatility in this.
Yeah, they both sound exactly the same. One of them sounds like Captain Jack Sparrow, and the other sounds like Willy Wonka. It's going to be really good. But I was going to say that the idea. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the rules of the dream world, because in the movie they're fucking never clearly stated. Like there's a moment actually when you were saying, Sean, like you can team up two characters together, and like there's a beat in the movie when Nancy falls asleep and she tells her boyfriend, she tells Johnny Depp, like, okay, you need to stay awake, and if I start to freak out in my bed, you need to wake me up and like pull me out. And then he falls asleep, right? But while she's in the dream world, he is showing up and she's like checking in with him. So, like, are they sharing the same dream? Like, she keeps being like, hey, are you still there? And he hops down from a tree. He's like, yeah, I'm still here. And so it's never really sure. Like, are they all sharing one dream space? Or, like, are they having separate dreams? Or is the nightmare world a shared area? Sometimes, like, Freddy Krueger shows up in the real world and, like, can hurt people, but he can also kill them in their dream world. It's completely fly by the seat of your pants rules, it seems like. Maybe sort of like solidifying those a little bit, I think would help me try and figure out what the mechanics are.
What it seems like to me is you have the full-on like nightmare world, which is like the Silent Hill kind of great, the comp is Silent Hill, where it's like you're just in that place. But there's also they bleed into each other a little bit, and I feel like the movie kind of plays fast and loose with that too. Like she picks up the phone and there's a tongue in it. Like, I'm
your boyfriend now.
Yeah. It's like that kind of shit happens in the real world, right? I mean, question mark. Like, you don't really know.
It happened to me today.
Oh, well. Yeah, that's good.
So you're right. It does happen in the real world.
This time it would be a cell phone, though, right? Like,
yeah.
But that would be something we would want to do in the game too, where it's like, am I dreaming now? Am I awake? Like as the game progressed, I think you'd want to increase the frequency of those events bleeding over.
Right.
They might not necessarily do you any harm, but it would be cool to kind of include them. It's like you go to call your friend, you pick it up, there's a tongue in the phone, and that's all that happens.
Classic.
And you get licked by the tongue, but we up the ante, and the tongue tries to French kiss her or you.
Nice.
Yeah, and then you can make a decision to do it or not. But
press X to make out with phone tongue.
In multiplayer, you could just you had a bunch of tongues you can put in phones so you can mess with your friends.
Just real
So you are
tongues?
playing Freddie.
You just put
No,
a tongue
that's
in
the
your phone,
collector's
and
edition.
your friends
No,
phone.
that's the collector's edition. If you buy the like $900 version, you get a phone that has like a mechanical tongue that you can like prank your friends with. Like the like super expensive collector's edition comes with that.
But it's
Is this in real life?
Yeah,
or in the
yeah. No,
game?
when you buy the game, right? When you buy the actual physical copy of the game for your PlayStation, if you buy the like $200 collector's edition, it comes with a bunch of mechanical tongues you can stick in your friends' phones.
I was going to say it comes with like an old style phone.
Yeah, or like a rotary phone
that
with
has
that
a
in
tongue.
it.
But no, but it looks like an old phone with a tongue that like it retracts into the handle. But it's actually really a cell phone that you can actually carry around with you and use.
So you're just like walking around with a rotary phone like down the street, like, oh,
Yeah.
sorry,
Yeah,
you
you're
got the
walking
wrong
around with a
number.
rotary phone that's actually just an iPhone. It has iPhone guts in it or whatever.
Oh man, yeah, good. That sounds like some stupid fucking marketing move that somebody would make. It's like, oh man, kids are gonna really love this.
Well, I mean, I know people personally who would buy that and then use that phone.
With the tongue in it.
Yeah, as their main
man.
phone because they're huge horror nerds and they're preying on horror nerds.
That's true.
affinity
Yeah,
for
that is the
this movie.
demographic.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
So where can I get this phone?
Well, when you buy the collector's edition of the game that we're creating / pitching right now, we can make that happen for you. We'll get some people on the phone, and our phone will also have tongues in it when we talk to people about making this game.
But, like we need somebody to give us dollars, millions of dollars for this, so we can make this game and make this tongue phone thing happen.
Actually, honestly, if we're being serious about it, it'll probably be a Kickstarter backer reward at like the $200 tier.
Oh, there you go. It's
but,
actually,
like,
you know what the cheap way to do it is? It's just a cell phone case.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, there you go. It's a
Yeah,
cell phone
at
case.
$50 tier.
You put it, yeah, it has a retractable tongue.
And it has like a little plug in it, like that can connect to your like the bottom of your iPhone that'll make it move back and forth. It kind of just eats your it eats your battery.
Oh, it's got an app. The phone, you can install an app on the phone that makes the tongue wiggle.
Yeah. That makes the tongue wiggle.
Yeah. No, there was there's one other thing I wanted to go into with the Dream World, right? Which is like, it seems to be just an exact duplicate of the real world, except the possibility space for fucked up shit to occur.
Well, and the
happens in it.
lighting. The lighting is like way more dramatic in the Dream World.
That's true. Yeah, everything's lit really harshly.
There's like a huge like everything is a spotlight beam shining behind it. But there's
And every basement door leads into a boiler room.
yeah, there's like fog everywhere and steam.
Not everywhere, just enough that one fog machine can create
Right.
in an climate controlled environment.
Yeah, one $20 from the '80s fog machine. No,
One Spencer gift fog machine.
we also get this really cool disco light. We're gonna just see how that feels too, with the colors kind of going. That might be a really nice nightmare effect in this movie we're making, Mr. Craven. No, I like it. It seems to be very similar to the real world, and a lot of that in the movie is so that you can slip into the nightmare world and not know you're there. But it feels like because we're sort of heavily systemizing the like awake asleep part, it's probably going to be pretty obvious when you go into the nightmare world, right? And we could probably play on that boiler room imagery a little bit because it's such an evocative like Nightmare on Elm Street thing, the boiler room, right?
Yeah.
You could see pipes like as you start to slip into the dream world. There's just like,
just bursting out from the ground.
we kind of not bursting from the grounds, but starting sort of to creep over the environment, like in a subtle backgroundy kind of way, or steam and stuff. I don't know. This might be a bad idea.
No, but that's what I was trying to say way earlier with like I think you'd want to spend the money, the game development time anyway, on making sure that the transitions were seamless and cool and felt
Right.
like obvious, but like it wasn't. It's not just a cutscene, right? Like the entire world is both worlds. It's kind of like Silent Hill in that way, where you're basically retexturing every single thing in the world, and there's more. You start walking along and you start seeing pipes on like the side of a building that shouldn't be there. And then,
Right.
you walk further along and, you turn the camera to your left and now all of a sudden you're in the boiler room. That kind of shit would be bad.
Okay, so I have two quick thoughts. The first one is, I don't know if you've played the new Dishonored at all. But there's a level in there where you are in this old dilapidated mansion, and you're given an object that it's like a mirror, basically, and you can see through the mirror into the past, and it's the same space, and you're moving in both spaces at the same time, because as you move in the 3D space, your mirror sort of reflects what's in what you would be looking into in the real in the other timeline. So, and you can swap back and forth at any time, so you can go through locked doors, and it's just like a lock and key kind of puzzle where you can avoid guards and sort of change the past, and it's reflected and stuff. But just the fact that you're actually traversing both of those spaces at the same time is really interesting, because you can kind of see the dilapidated version of something, and then if you look, if you bring up the mirror while you're walking around and you can still move, you can see the other version, and it's a really cool, like, both of those exist at the same time in the same space. I don't know how they did it technically, but it's really fucking incredible.
That was my first thought. Just like, is that all rendered to texture camera?
No. Like if there's a physical object, it's incredible. It probably is. Like, they probably built two spaces, and they just put a camera in the same place you would be, and then rendered to the mirror text. It's fucking incredible, regardless. And the level is really cool too. But the other thing I wanted to mention, I think this is the thing that will clinch it, and it will make the transitions feel really good, is if you make the game. I've always assumed it was first person, kind of like the new Resident Evil. That might just be me, but that's how my brain sees it. And your exhaustion bar isn't something it's always on the screen. You have to go into a menu or hit escape or hit back or something to bring it up. So if you're just mindlessly doing tasks, like building traps or whatever,
cool.
You might just fucking lose track of time, and then all of a sudden you turn a corner and there's a bunch of pipes, and you're like, "Fuck me, God damn it, I fell asleep."
Yeah, that's cool. And I mean, you don't have to systemize it either. Like, or what you could do is, as things progress in the game, like the difficulty slider. The difficulty level is basically that the meter goes away, and you lose track of when you're going in and out of it. Or like there's a way you could do that would be cool. But like, as I say, like I think that having a third person thing too, like you could actually like have the character look more tired, but you'd have to like be looking for it. Like you'd have to like like the walk would change.
Little changes in posture.
Yeah, exactly. And like
you could get like your hands could kind of start twitching, and you could like do like you make a ball out of your fist, and you're like, my hand's shaking, kind of animations on your character and stuff.
Exactly. Just little things like that start creeping up subtly to kind of reinforce that the meter is changing, and you should look at it. But like,
your walk speed could slowly go down too.
Yeah,
like you could, or like
you're
pressing forward on the stick, but it, if you were to hold it, it would just eventually get slower.
Yeah. You just start to do like the George Michael in Arrested Development, like walk into a crawl into a lay on the ground. You just push forward.
You'd pass a couch and a character would just lay on it.
Yeah,
you'd be like, I didn't do that.
I like the idea though that you like if your bar or whatever we end up using for visualization is just not something you can look at without making an active choice to check it, and you're just setting about doing tasks. And it being a thing where it's you're busy trying to accomplish something, and then you don't even notice that you've fallen asleep, which is just how that movie works. And it feels like you'd be a character in the movie where they're just kind of doing stuff and they kind of nod off, and they're still sitting in the seat in their classroom, but now all of a sudden there's like a hanging body outside the window, and you're like, "Fuck me, I'm in the dream."
Oh man, you know what the best thing would be? Would be to use the not make the bar obvious enough that you could look at it and tell where you were, but like have to manage it just like any other resource. So like if say the watch was the thing that we used, as you could check your time since last went to bed on.
Oh, that's cool.
Do you know what I mean? And then you have to think about it. You have to remember, like, shit, I slept 3 hours earlier. I slept 3 hours between this hour and this hour.
It gives you like detailed stats of your sleeping schedule.
Yeah. I mean, more or less, right?
The game comes with a notepad, so you can write this down.
How many calories did you intake today? It just becomes like a health monitoring game.
Well, but it does become, there could be a system for keeping track of it, so you could reference it, but it wouldn't be like an obvious like pull the menu up, see it. Okay, good. I got 10 more minutes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's much more fuzzy this way.
Yeah, and you would have to be responsible for actually sort of managing it a little bit more, which I think would help with that feeling of like, fuck, I messed it up. Now I'm asleep. Shit, I got to get out of here. Like that kind of thing.
I like that a lot.
there's as well as visual cues that I think that we could play with audio in a really cool way too, to start to cue the player in slowly, like
1, 2, Freddie's coming for you.
I was going to suggest that, yeah, but also
you just start hearing that song.
Start warping the way that the world sounds, and it's very gradual. But like all of a sudden, you're going to be like, your footsteps or something you do will sound bizarre, and be like, "Fuck!"
It's all
I'm falling
recorded
asleep.
backwards. You're just in the Black Lodge, like all the.
We're just like turning up the reverberation or whatever it is we're doing. But it's a gradual thing that's not necessarily immediately noticeable. And then you do an act. Maybe there's like an action you haven't taken in a certain amount of time. Like, the example I can think off the top of my head is like when you go into your storage box in Resident Evil and you open it, and just the creak of the hinges sounds different.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think sound is a huge tool there, because you could it could be a lot subtler with it without people noticing.
Right.
But then I mean, but all the best games have good sound and use sound for cues for things. Like I feel like I know we talked about it a long time ago, but like if you go to like listen to like Overwatch, like so much of the information you're getting about what's happening in the game at the time comes from sound, and it makes you aware of things. But that's a learned thing. Like you have to learn it, and I think this could be the same way, where it's like over time you start to learn what these things mean, and you start to pick up on them, and then you feel smart, and that's cool.
Yeah.
So, sorry, if you had another thought that I interrupted, please. I wanted to change the subject.
No, I thought I did, and then my mind just went blank.
As soon as I opened my mouth, your mind went blank. I have that ability. No, I was going to say, like, okay, all of that sounds really awesome. Like, I think we've nailed that transition. It's going to feel really good and really true to the movie and sort of like that feel. But I want to talk. We still have some time left. I want to talk a little bit about the actual like goal of the game. Like, it sounds like kill Freddie is like the high level goal, but how are you doing that in the dream, the waking world? What are you doing when you're in the nightmare world? Is it just like avoid the alien and just try and make it back out again? Are you trying to scavenge something, bring like Chris suggested, bring back proof? Is there something in the nightmare world that is like, the stupid version would be like a crafting material that's rare and you can only get in the nightmare world, which would be stupid. But you know what I mean? Like, is there something valuable in the world that you're trying to bring back?
There's a crystal that's only in the nightmare world that you have to harvest.
I think that the best thing to me would be the waking, because the movie kind of works this way, right? Like they're trying to figure out what's going on while they're dealing with it, and so like having to figure out like where Freddie's bones are, or like that's you have this goal of like you first you have to find somebody that tells you what happened, and then like once you find that out, it gives you the next waking world goal, which is like go find the high school that or like the boiler room got torn down years ago, so why am I still seeing it? Like whatever it is, like there's a sort of mystery element to it that's kind of got you like going to talk to people or going to figure shit out in the waking world. But the nightmare world is interrupting that for a while. But then in the waking world, once you figure out like, oh, okay, I've got enough information to know how to deal with Freddie, now you can start to fight back in the nightmare world.
So would he have like different weaknesses every time you played? Like there'd be some sort of key information that is randomized per game that you play, so you can just kind of every time you play it won't be the same thing over and over again, right?
This depends. I mean, if we're talking about doing a procedurally generated thing, sure. But like if we're just talking about crafting a linear...
No. Well, it depends, right? Like, are we talking about a game that you would replay over and over again, or is this just like a linear? That's the whole that you play it once, kind of like playing Alien Isolation or something like that, where it's much more sort of like narratively focused and linear. Which it sounds like that's what you're. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
I do think that there's some room for like some of the stuff we talked about earlier with your friends and like who survives, right? Like that could be different based on like Until Dawn style, right? Like you could play that game and different people can survive. There's a lot of different permutations for who makes it out based on what you do in the game, and I think this could be the same way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it wouldn't. I don't think it would feel true to the franchise and the story, or not story, but just kind of the tone of what we're trying to create here is if everybody could survive.
No, I agree.
You're going to lose somebody eventually. It just depends on your actions. who exactly gets lost first. But I think, kind of speaking to the procedural generated thing that you're talking about, Harris, I think that there might be a way you can blend the two, where you could kind of, in the waking world, figure things out about certain environments, and then depending on like where you end up and what you've discovered, it's not always the same. Every time you go into the dream world, based on the timeline of the game, it's not always the same linear version of the game, if that makes sense. It depends on like where you entered the dream world on the timeline versus where you are geographically. Like that could kind of help with some of that replay value and not seem so one-to-one, if that makes sense.
Right. But I'm also okay with it being just a linear experience, and like the second time you play it, you might play it again, and things might mix around. But the basic layout of the game, like the basic story, like same with Mass Effect, right? Like you can save different people and you can romance different people, but the main thrust of the story is going to always be the same. And I think that's probably the equivalent that I would look at a game like that, where you can talk to different people, you can have a slightly different experience, you can kind of customize the way that you solve things in different ways. With force or with negotiation in Mass Effect's case, but for the most part, it's you are just talking about you are purely talking about the game being sort of a linear narrative.
Well, I think I think it's hard when you're dealing with something that's much lore behind it, unless we want to change that in interesting ways, or do something where you can survive but not beat Freddie. Like, there's different endings that you could do, potentially based on the way that you acted. Like, maybe he gets all of you, and that's the end of the game because you didn't find the right bones, or whatever fucking dumb thing.
Damn it, whose bones are these?
Well, it feels like you lost. It does feel like you lost, but, like, that's okay in a horror movie. Like, that, and a horror game to me. Like, I feel like you could... I'm not saying that you definitely do that, but what I am saying is that, like, you could build a case for... Like, spoilers for Until Dawn, just for everybody who hasn't played it, but I literally sucked so bad at the last sequence of the game that I blew the house up and got everybody killed.
Nice.
And so, because of that, like, I was fine with it because it was my fault, right?
Yeah, it just felt like the end of the movie.
Yeah, exactly. It just felt like the end of the story. And the story ended with all of these kids getting murdered and Freddie surviving. That's a legitimate ending, as long as it doesn't feel like you failed,
Can we have him, like, turn to the camera and say, like, I'll see you again in Nightmare on Elm Street 2? Like, once he kills all the kids? Can we?
No, we can't.
Oh, shit.
No.
Okay, never mind.
Absolutely not.
You could do something really fun there in 3D, where like the game comes with 3D glasses.
Yeah,
and then,
I'll see you, and he like points at the camera.
But it's not until that point that like the game pauses and like put
your 3D glasses on now. Yeah. I was actually going to say the same thing.
You're like, shit, where did I put those? That was like 40 hours ago. Fuck.
I borrowed this from my friend. He only gave me the disc.
I just have a digital copy.
That's the DRM. Yeah, like, you need to put the glasses on to see the fucking, like, code to input at the beginning of the game. Like, the dial-a-pirate.
Yeah, classic.
That seems foolproof.
Yeah, totally. No, okay, so there is a mystery to uncover, and going into the dream world, this is my shitty, like, oversimplification, but something akin to, like, there is a code in the real world, and the cipher to solve the code is in the dream world. But like, there is information in the dream world that you need to find and bring back into the real world that helps you uncover the mystery. That someone's name is scrawled in blood on the wall, and that's the father of the guy you need to talk to, who gives you information about Freddie or whatever, right? Like,
I got it. There's a scientist who's, as everyone thinks, is a kook. That believes in the dream world.
Yeah.
And he can't enter it because he's not a kid.
All right.
So you meet him.
No, stop.
If he needs you to bring back...
Stop it.
What? It's too good? You're right. I'll stop.
No, but you know what I mean, though? Like, there is a key piece of information that acts as the key to the lock that is in the real world. That
also makes sense in terms of, like, it being a shared dream space, which it does feel like the movie does, like, set that up. Like, they are sharing the dream space. So, like, finding out information from the parents via the dream space, or that the parents, do you know what I mean? If their dream is leading them to remember all this stuff that's getting churned up by remembering Freddy Krueger.
Right.
And so they're dreaming about the time that it happened, and you can find that part in the dream world. and then get some information to take over to the scientist guy. And but you know what I mean? Like I feel like that would work well.
Yeah.
I think you're dead on. That they do need to interact in a way that's more than just going in there. Because there should be a reason to want to go there sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, there should be a value to going in there. And I think that the idea, and you pitched this right when we started this, like the idea of like the psychonauts, like there are like the parents, when they're asleep, they're in this shared dream space, and the dream versions of them have information, maybe because you're witnessing their memories in dream form in front of you, and you're just like looking at them and go, oh yeah, you were a kid and this happened, and I'm literally watching it happen. Or you're talking to the like dream version of them in a weird fugue state, and you're just like asking the questions and they answer the questions. But like tracking, like going to the dream world and having to track down like Dream Mom and like have to go ask her a question or watch her kill Freddy Krueger or whatever to get some vital piece of information, but you're also being stalked by Freddy Krueger in that space. I think that sounds really, really cool.
Yeah, and I think that like this also goes back to the earlier idea of having to pull out evidence or whatever. Like, if there's got to be some mechanic, some reason to want to go to the dream world, and if there's more than one, even all the better. Then the alarm stuff improves the game even more. Where it's like, okay, I'm going to go in. I need to go in for 5 minutes so I can figure out, where blah 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 is, and then you're incentivized to do it.
There might be a way too in which, and this isn't completely materialized in my head, so forgive me if there's some. It's not completely thought out, but like there might be a way in which you find something that triggers something. Like in the dream world, it's a shared space with Freddie, and there's memories of Freddy's that exist in there that you can see, that you can trigger, and it might be under player discovery to figure out what triggers that. Like the dumb answer is like it's something maybe he's allergic to bees or something, and he brings bees into the.
It just becomes the Candyman horror movie instead.
It's just something like that's like almost like repellent, but it brings up like kind of in the way that we talked about the Arkham games, but like it kind of brings up that sort of like holographic UI. Like this is like something happened here for Freddy, or we see things that kind of use your kind of your detective mode here, like blood stains, for instance, like it's the first thing that's coming to mind, but like you can investigate these kind of things, and like you investigate them, and you see like one of Freddy's memories, and you'll see like a character that you've met in the awake world, and you're like, whoa, what the fuck is going on here? What does this have to do? And like it'll give you impetus to go investigate something with that character in the awake real world.
You realize that he won't kill unless he has his cardigan, so you just like sneak into his house in the night and take his cardigan, and he wakes up in the morning and he's ready to go murder, and he doesn't have his fucking ugly ass red and green sweater, and he's like, oh.
It's just Scary Terry all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Where's my sweater, bitch?
Yeah. All right.
But I don't know. I mean, that's a very loose idea, but like something that kind of like encourages exploration and makes it so that you have to investigate and figure out how to bring him down.
You being able to find something that helps you fight Freddy is cool. I don't know about the holographic UI though.
I know, and I don't think that it necessarily has to be that. And when I say holographic, it'll obviously look more spiritual and like ethereal. In this,
what you're saying is you have some sort of like there is some sort of visualization of that there is a memory to explore.
Yeah, I get it.
Whatever
I'm just giving you shit.
Yes, I know, and fuck you for doing that.
You're fucking welcome.
It's just a possibility to kind of give the player a way to kind of put the pieces together,
and it'll give us, it'll be an opportunity for us to really empathize, get to know Freddy, get to really know Freddy, Mr. Krueger, and sort of empathize with this child murdering ghost. That seems good.
Maybe as a player, you decide that maybe it's not your place to kick him out of the dream world.
Listen, everything balances out, man.
Look, that's just one of the endings. One of the endings is you can convince Freddy that he was a horrible person and he gives up.
You know, or
Just guilt
better
him.
yet, you're like, I get what you're doing here, and he just throws you his spare sweater and his right glove.
That's another
his
ending.
left glove, whatever one he's not wearing. Yeah.
That's a separate ending.
And his spare hat.
So
and
multiple
you're
endings
fucking
for sure.
Teddy Krueger.
What if your name isn't Teddy, though?
It becomes Teddy.
It is now.
So
You get married? You get married to Freddie?
oh man, nice.
And you change your first name as well.
There's a weird dating game that's like a sub, like an Easter egg in this game.
Well, yeah, on the one ending, there's a dating game. And then you guys go on a couple dates, and like a couple, it's like, do you want to go to the dream world or do you want to go to the real world tonight? And then they make a decision.
Yeah.
It's like all there is to eat in the dream world is fucking other people. Like,
I'm tired of children. Can we eat something different for the once? God.
Freddie, put your tongue back in your mouth. Come on.
Perfect. We did it. We nailed another one. Killed another one.
We got it. We got
put it on the shelf.
What is this called? This game, Nightmare on Elm Street, Silent Hill ripoff. The game.
No.
Nightmare on Silent Hill Street.
I don't think it's going to go through certification. I think we need to come up with something.
Well, it's got to be like Nightmare on Elm Street : Dream Warriors. Oh yeah, The Reckoning would be good. Dream Warriors is the third game.
This is so good.
That's the third movie.
Man.
That's the third movie. But it would be that though.
In.
Like it's like, oh, we get it. We reference the Dream Warriors.
No,
movie,
if there was a third game. At this point, we're making our own canon, right? Like we're squarely in our own.
We hit the reset button here.
Yeah, no, like the first game is pretty closely tied to the movie. The second game kind of like starts to create a little bit of additional information, background story that the movies didn't have, and the third game is like, we now have teleporters that can transport us at any time to the dream world. They can bring things with us, so we're gonna bring guns and ammunition, and we're just gonna fucking hunt this motherfucker down.
Or it's like the Assassin's Creed, like they've got you in a lab.
Yeah, exactly. And
like you're Nancy, whatever the fuck her last name was,
Krueger,
closest descendant, and the only person that can battle Freddy Krueger.
You have to step back into her like genetic memories.
You go to sleep. Yeah.
Love it. So Silent Hill. Nightmare on Elm Street, The Reckoning, and then Nightmare on Elm Street. Dream Warriors is the hotly anticipated follow up. We'll do a separate video
Dream
game.
Warriors.
Will that have that like rad like spray painty like 80s font like the Blood Dragon? Like.
No, it sounds like you guys don't like. The third movie is called Nightmare on Elm Street: The Dream Warriors.
Are you fucking kidding me?
No.
Yeah, I knew that.
Oh shit! I was just making a goof.
I looked at this last night.
Man, okay.
I looked at this last night, and Nancy comes back in it.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
You guys are. I thought you were just making some
Warriors.
really good jokes, but that's just the actual canon of those movies.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's called Nightmare on Elm Street: Dream Warriors, so that people who like Nightmare on Elm Street know that we know what we're doing.
Shit, this is why we make the big bucks. This is why we invite you on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm not making any bucks for this. I may have seen no bucks.
I think bucks have flown in the other direction. Actually,
we'll expect bucks soon. No, thanks for joining the podcast this week. We had a lot of fun talking about this stupid movie and its amazing game that we're going to make out of it.
Well, we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us on this adventure, on this media adventure. Bye.
And stay awake.
1, 2, 3.
There it is. I was really hoping someone would do it. Join us next time for a special episode 10, where we will take Rick and Morty and turn it into something. And it's actually a user request, a listener request from iTunes. So if you're interested in leaving us a request, you can email us at storiedcast@gmail.com, or you can leave a review on iTunes, which helps us a lot. So that would be great if you would do that. And we'll see you next time. Storied is Sean Ainsworth, Chris Rebbert, and Harrison Pink. And our music, as always, is by the amazing Jared Emerson Johnson. Thank you for listening.